Welcome to Live with Impact. I'm Angela Brown, and I'm here today with Omuugn, and we are discussing a really important topic, and it's one that all of us need to be more aware of in our personal lives, and it's the topic of consistency. And we are reading from the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. And if you have not taken a chance already, this is a perfect opportunity to go ahead and pick up a copy of it. This is volume 1 of volume 2. And every Saturday, we're joining Omuugn live. And as we join him live, we're unpacking the different elements of the book, The Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. One of the things that I like best about this book and this series of books is that every single week there's a different topic. And these are topics on how to be a better parent and how to be a better leader and how to be a better business owner and how to be a better manager. And you know what? How to be a better person. And they're all different kinds of topics like accountability and taking action in your life and communication and being honest and having integrity. I know it's the fundamental truths of life. But today we're talking about consistency. So please help me welcome Omuugn. Grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and let's unpack what consistency is and how we can use it in our personal lives. Hey, Omuugn, how are you today?
Hey, I'm really fine. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm recovering from pneumonia. So while we're here today, I might be drinking my apple cider vinegar and my lemon juice just to get through today's session. But I did not want to skip today because today's topic is on consistency. And being here every single week is a consistent action that has become a part of my weekly routine and the highlight of my week. So thanks also for meeting me here today.
Yeah, it is fun to be consistent in everything that we really want to accomplish. So it's an exciting topic today, and all of the topics are so expansive in their reality and all of the different perspectives that we don't attempt to really cover all of those. The idea of this broadcast is to simply identify what topics that you should consider and evaluate in your own life. And we're going to give you some ideas to think about and some insights, but by no means is this a comprehensive thing. We just want to spur your interest in the topic and have you look at it in maybe a different way than you have in the past. Consistency is one of those. Everyone kind of thinks that they're consistent, and they really are. But sometimes we're not consistent in the way that we think we are,
Mm.
because consistency can be both positive and negative. And well, I'll let you ask some questions, and we'll pursue that.
Well, I want to start first by saying, because I think most people know what consistency is or what it represents in their lives. And I want to start by saying that I've known you as long as I've been alive. And for those of you that are joining or watching the replay, Omuugn happens to be my dad. I know, how lucky did I get, right? So
Oh,
one
we're
of the
both
things that I,
lucky.
oh, thank you. I noticed growing up that Omuugn lived a life of consistency. This wasn't talking about consistency, but this was actually living a life of consistency and practicing what he preached. And as a child, we had little sessions in our family where we called them study class. And study class is where we would get together, and there was no Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn book. They were just in his head and in his writings as he was learning and consciously and consistently learning through the course of my life. Then he would get the family together and he would say, "Here's what I learned." And we would share these ideas and concepts with us. So from a very, very young age, I say I'm happy to be here on a Saturday, but this is a consistent action that started when I was born and has gone all the way through my entire life to the point where there was a very consistent, intentional, let me teach you what I've learned and let's learn to become better people. And so I want to ask you, what was your interest in consistently learning where most people stop after high school or college? They're like, "Hey, I graduated. Here's my ticket to stop learning." And you were like, "No, no, no. We're going to continually learning from the beginning to the end." Where did that interest come from?
Well, I think the beginning is that we have to decide what kind of people we want to be. You have to decide, who am I really? How am I going to go through life? What are my core values? What is my belief system? What things are really important to me? If you don't understand those things, then it's hard to be consistent, because if you don't understand your core values, then there's no standard to measure by. And life is very diverse. It's bringing us all kinds of circumstances and settings all of the time. And it's difficult really to be consistent with all of your core values in a very changing world. And so we have to really know who we are, where we are, and what our values are, because we need to approach life in an intentional way. We have to plan. We have to, I call them proactions. Instead of reacting to things, you need to actually decide how you're going to react to things. And so it takes a lot of intentional programming and training to do that effectively. And as I look at all of my children, I'm not exactly sure how successful I was in all of those things. In the beginning, I didn't know, I didn't understand what I understand today. And so if I were going to start all over with my family, I would start over with these traits and characteristics that make a person really who they want to be, or what should be the standard by which you measure your life, so that everyone understands that. I don't think there's a more important thing for a parent to teach their child than to really evaluate their belief system, their core values, and their characteristics, so that the child really understands who they are and how they fit into everything. Those are just really, really critical things. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And if you don't really look at yourself in a clear way, you sometimes overlook your weaknesses, and maybe you rely too heavily on your strengths. And some of your weaknesses can really degrade your life quality. And so, for example, consistency is one of those. If you're inconsistent in your life, instead of developing trust and integrity and some of those higher qualities, you kind of create a persona that no one can really depend on. And so it's valuable to you to really understand who you are. And it begins in clearly defining your core value. And maybe that's a good place to begin, is to look at some of the core values that really make us who we are. For example, love and compassion is a core value. We should love our spouse. We should love our children. We should love our families. We should love our friends. And there are different kinds of love. The Greeks called the different kinds eros and agape and pia and philo, which are the friendship kind of love, the brotherly kind of love, the family kind of love, and the intimate kind of love that people have in like a marriage relationship. And so if that's one of your core values, then as you're around other people, you can ask yourself, am I really demonstrating love to this person? I'm trying to communicate love in my way, but am I communicating it in their way so that they receive it like I'm intending? Because a lot of times we kind of miscommunicate because we all have our own belief system, and we define words differently, and we see things differently. So sometimes the way we interact with people, they don't really receive the exact message that we're trying to convey, which I think is critically important.
But when you speak of love and you speak of the different types of love, one of the interesting but consistent ways that you taught us as children to love others was to first love ourselves. And it was through the form of, number one, having positive attitudes, positive affirmations, and then there was a physical hygiene component that went along with that, where you did an inspection of us and then our little buddies. An older person was responsible for a younger buddy in the family. where we had to make sure that our hair was clean, that our ears were clean, our necks were clean, our teeth were brushed, our fingernails were clean, our elbows and arms were clean. And we would all stand up in a great big line, and Omuugn would go through and he would pass off. And we say pass off as an inspection to make sure that we cared for ourselves. And so growing up, we were taught to have a personal hygiene routine that included caring for and loving ourselves, so that once we love ourselves, we are in a better position to love our siblings, our parents, and then other people that enter our space. And that was a consistent action that happened throughout my entire childhood, which I really appreciate, because that then transcended into my business as a business cleaning owner, where I was then instilling the same exact beliefs in the people that would then show up to clean other people's homes. That we felt that if we presented ourselves in a clean and well hygiene kind of manner, that then that would translate to the job that we were doing. So tell me about where it was in the beginning that you decided that it was not just a belief system to be consistent with, but daily actions like our personal hygiene.
Uh, that reminded me of a funny story. I remember I remember one morning we were having the inspection, and I asked everyone if they had taken their baths and they were clean. And I noticed that on one of my sons, there was some dirt on his arm. And I asked him if he had cleaned up and prepared himself for the day. And he said, yes. And I said, are you certain? He said, yes, I'm certain. And so I went over and I took his arm and I licked my finger and I started to roll the dirt up on his arm. And and as the dirt manifested itself, his eyes got bigger and bigger, and he realized that he had been caught in deviating from our process, and that was really kind of funny. It took him by surprise, but yeah, we when we started out, we didn't really understand all of the processes, but as we learned things, we tried to implement them in our family. We were always in the process of learning new things, and as we learned them, we implemented them, whether it was in diet. And at the beginning of the year, we have a tendency as a nation, I suppose, to look at that time as making New Year's resolutions and things that we're going to do during the year. And there are some people who don't really follow through with those resolutions. They make them sort of haphazardly and mindlessly. They recognize somewhere in their being that they should exercise more and they should eat better and that they should avoid some of the addictive things that are not good for us. And maybe they even recognize some bad habits that need to be changed. But then during the course of the year, uh, those things fall by the wayside. They're pushed into the back burner on the stove. And after a while, we realized that we could use the same ones over and over again every year because we really didn't accomplish them the year before. So we need to be aware. In fact, that's one of the core values is mindfulness, being present in the moment and being aware of our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, holding ourselves accountable. Because if you don't hold yourself accountable, if you've decided, for example, I know in your life, you go to the gym on a regular basis to maintain your health. And if you commit to do that and then you put it off because of this reason or that reason, the weather is bad, you don't feel well today, and there's always an excuse. And so some of the excuses are valid, but some of them are just excuses. And we need to differentiate between those things. We want to try to be as consistent in our lives as we possibly can be, to be consistent with our core values. And love isn't the only core value, by the way. Our spiritual growth is a core value. There's someone greater than we are. Deity is sort of recognized in all cultures. There's something that we aspire to. There's enlightenment that we aspire to. There's sort of a putting together of your life in such a way that it's meaningful, that you have purpose and that you accomplish things. And so that's a core value for everyone, to get better and to progress and to keep learning and growing and developing in all of our qualities. And there's also the aspect of being in harmony with nature. We're aware of all of the pollution and the things that man has created that violates what we would like nature to be. Nature is sort of pristine, and the world has its own way of cleansing itself and taking care of itself. And we challenge that in so many ways by dumping pollutants into things thoughtlessly, mindlessly. We are consistently not connected with nature as a society. And so as a society, we need to be consistent in nurturing our environment and being in harmony with the natural systems that take place. For example, we're finding new ways to recycle things. Man has a great idea to build windmills to create his own energy. And after so many years, we have all of these big windmill blades that nobody knows what to do with, that are past their useful prime. They're taking the windmills down, and now we're having big stacks of windmill blades going into landfills and in places where they're not going to break down because of the materials they're made of. And so we've created another thing that needs to be dealt with. And we do that in so many different ways, like with plastic. Plastic is so convenient and we use it for so many things. And after it's used, what do we do with it? It's starting to build up in our landfills and pollute our oceans and our waterways. We need to be consistent in looking at causes and effects. If we're going to do a cause, what is the effect downstream? And how is that going to impact our lives, our communities, our families? So we need to be in alignment with the kind of person, the kind of community, the kind of nation that we really want to be. Because if we're not consistent with those values, we just run amok and cause problems instead of provide solutions.
One of the things that you consistently did when I was a child, and you've done it all the way through to even now, and this is as long as I've been alive, you have believed in self-sustainability, and you have grown your own food, and you've had your own orchards and your own animals and things like that. And there's a part of you that said, wait a second, I can do my part to grow organic food and to grow healthy food, and then to provide that for my family, even at a stage of an enormous amount of canning. And I remember seasons where we would can 2,000 quarts of peaches and 2,000 quarts of pears and 2,000 quarts of tomato salsa and beans and potatoes and just an enormous amount of production there. But so tell me about the consistency of that, because that's not just something that's a trend. This is, oh, I think I'm going to give this a try. But you said this is a belief that I have, therefore I'm going to do this. And I'm not just going to do it once, but I'm going to do it every year, every year, every year in a very consistent, methodical pattern.
Well, it's a complex question because we did have kind of a unique family in that we had 19 children. And we had to do a lot of canning and a lot of producing our own things just to touch all of the bases. And one of the things that we learned early on was quality is important. Quality is one of those things that manifests in the things that we buy, the things that we produce, the things that we eat. When we eat food, we want it to be quality food. And we learned early on that producing our own food, we could control the quality. We could put things into the soil so that the soil had all of the nutrients that we needed. Even to this day, we use dolomite and azomite and zeolite and these minerals that we put into our compost bins so that as things compost and break down, they become part of the organic system that we live in. And if you're continually learning, then you need to continually integrate what you're learning into your lifestyle. And you need to do that consistently so that you're always growing and always developing and getting better at what you're doing. And overall, as I think back, it's pretty amazing that there were only 2 or 3 times that I ever remember taking a child to the hospital. I mean, with all of those children and all of our experiences, we were basically a pretty healthy bunch. We would soak wheat berries overnight, and then in the morning we'd have a bowl of wheat berries for our cereal. And we would grind our own wheat and we would make our own bread. There's a real problem in our society today with gluten. And one of the problems is that the way wheat is grown, gluten has increased in the actual wheat like 3 times. So when you eat bread that's produced in the commercial system today, you're getting 3 times the gluten that you used to receive. And even to this day, I grow my own wheat, and we grind our own wheat, and we process our own wheat and our own barley. And the change from when I was young to now is just unbelievable. Everything was, well, we'd go to a farmer and we would buy tomatoes, and they were like $3 a bushel. And we'd have a whole bushel of tomatoes for $3. And they were all organic and they were all wholesome, and they were fertilized with manures and composted things, and they were really healthy vegetables. And I was reading not too long ago that the vegetables today only have 30% of the nutritive values that vegetables used to have. And we used to buy apples by the bushel. When I was growing up, everything was by the bushel. Apples and pears and tomatoes, you buy everything by the bushel. And now I go into the store and tomatoes are like $3 a pound, or apples are $3 a pound. And it's just amazing. We get a lesser quality all of the time, and we're paying more and more and more for it. And it seems to be a really bad loop that we're in. And so I think we need to have some kind of a lifestyle, again, being consistent with our values. If our value is health and nutrition and doing things right, then we should put pressure on those people that are responsible for producing the food that we're eating that isn't as healthy as it could be. We're allowing companies to fertilize and use insecticides and herbicides and all of these chemicals that are really not healthy. We're allowing people, I don't know exactly who these people are, but they're putting toxic fluoride in the water that we drink. One of the most toxic chemicals known to man is being put into the water supplies of some of our cities. And we use things to disinfect our water because of the way we treat our water and the way we handle our water. I
Well,
happen to live
when
in
you talk about water, we live in an era that is getting worse and worse, and it's things like when we have our own homes, we put like dishwashing detergents and laundry detergents and fabric softeners in our water systems by just doing loads of laundry. And then there are a lot of home hair dyes where you can dye your hair, and lots of people have purple and green and yellow and black hair and whatever, all different kinds of fun designs in their hair, and all of that hair dye then goes down into the water systems. And then we have our regular body oils when we take a shower, and it washes off body oils and proteins from our body, just regular dirt and sweat. Then we mix that with things like shampoos and conditioners and oil treatments, that all that goes into our water systems. And so it's no wonder that people just keep adding things to our water systems, because we're recycling the water that we use. And one of the frustrating things is there are minute particles of that have been known to cause all different kinds of genetic mutations. And I just had on my Ask a House Cleaner show a couple of weeks ago, I had a specialist who is a hormone specialist that was talking about fertility. And she was saying there is a huge push right now in the people that are going to fertility clinics because their hormones have been out of whack due to the chemicals that are in the water supplies. And it's the chemicals that we breathe, it's the chemicals that we use in our homes, it's the water supplies, what you're talking about with the pesticides, with the food. I mean, the world is not the way it used to be. When we grew up, and I say we, like I'm dating myself, but way back when, there we did eat organic food. And like you said, we weren't sick growing up. Do you know how many times that kids today, just an average kid, goes to the doctor on average for different viruses and infections and whatever? And we're not talking about broken bones because they fell out of a tree. We're talking about just sicknesses and allergies. And they were allergies. I mean, I didn't even hear about allergies till I moved away from home. I never even heard about it. And then I don't know if you watch TV. I don't watch much TV because
No, I don't watch much TV.
we pretty much grew up without one. But I was watching TV the other night, and in a 1 hour program, there were seven or eight different ads for medications that I'd never heard of for diseases I never knew existed. And they're like, ask your doctor if this is right for you. And then they gave this huge layout of this is going to cause insomnia and bloating and diarrhea and blood clots and headaches. And I was like, why would I ask my doctor if that's right for me? Like, I just checked and it's pretty much is not, right? But the world that we live in right now has become so polluted and so complicated that when you talk about consistency of awareness, of having a healthier way to live and choosing a healthier way to live, I think that is so impactful because so many of us are just drifting aimlessly through our lives, buying shiny stuff off the shelves. We wander down the shelves and we're like, oh, I saw this on an ad. This will like clean my whole house in one fell swoop. No, it does not. This is just a whole bunch of chemicals and it does not clean your house in one fell swoop. I know this because I'm a house cleaner by trade. And so there's still a lot of elbow grease that's required. And there's a lot of stuff that can clean your house that is pH neutral. So I love the fact that we're having this conversation because you're absolutely right. Sickness is at an all-time high right now. In fact, we became so sick as a nation, as a world, they just closed down the whole world for a minute during COVID. Hey, there's a new virus. All of you go home. Isolate yourselves. Quarantine. We're all sick. What on earth? What has the world come to?
Well, and you can expand that in not only on the personal level, but on the industrial level, on the community level. Sometimes as communities, the way we operate our landfills and the things that we allow. I noticed that there was one fellow who has a business, a very successful business, where he takes lumber and trees that people chop down, tree services, and when the state clears brush and things off the side of the road, they bring all of that to his property, and he has one of these big grinding machines, a mulching machine, and he runs all of that through, and he creates this wood chip, and he composts it, and he has this available for all of the gardeners in his area. They're just organic things that people make available to him. It doesn't cost him anything to procure all of that, and yet he has a really nice product to sell, and he has a successful business. But we don't take care of our landfills. We allow companies to pollute waterways, to pollute the environment, and several instances have come about this year where in transporting radioactive things and dangerous chemicals, there have been some rail mishaps and some truck mishaps where pollution on a grand scale has taken place. And we don't put enough time into analyzing our systems and how we do things. We need to be consistent in keeping everything natural and pure. And like you say, there are so many things. I think the average adult now is on like 6 medications. And some of those medications are for the symptoms of other medications. And it's just a kind of a cycle that we don't want to encourage, let's say. And I know there's some things that you can't talk about on the air very well, but there are a lot of medical things that are unnecessary, let's say, and we need to be cognizant of what goes into our bodies. And sometimes there are processes and materials that they want to put into our bodies that are just like fluoride. They're just toxic chemicals. And sometimes if you have a particular illness, they want to radiate it or put chemicals that will destroy those things plus other things in your body. And so we need to be really, really aware that we are as close to holistic and health producing things as we can be in all of our systems. And
Well, right now this is no surprise as of right now, but right now, as we are recording this show, there is a global epidemic of opiates right now that have been prescribed, and people overdosing and people being addicted. And it's an epidemic now, and it's a global issue. And there are a lot of people close to home. I had an employee whose husband died from an opioid addiction and overdose. And it's very close to home because most of us know someone who has overdosed as a result of that. And it starts out with you have a surgery or something, and they give you some kind of a painkiller, and then you keep having pain, and so they keep giving you medication, and it's called pain management. And I recently had a knee surgery, and all they wanted to do for pain management was give me more painkillers. And I said, I'm not interested in killing the pain. I'm interested in getting better. And the therapy that I was going to wasn't helping. And I got really frustrated because on a scale of 1 to 10, my pain was like a 15. And I said, I'm doing something very wrong. And so killing pain and just taking medication wasn't the answer. And you mentioned earlier, I like to work out, but consistently I had fallen away from that as a result of my knee being all bugged out, and you can't go running or what have you with a bummed up knee. So I had to really do a deep dive. And I said, if I'm going to get my life back on track and I'm going to get my health back, it's not a series of taking more medication. It's a series of literally changing what I eat and changing my lifestyle. And that's where I really delved into at a deeper level, intermittent fasting. And I started cutting preservatives out of my diet. I said, there's something that's causing the inflammation in my knee. And if I can listen to my knee and listen to the pain, maybe when I start repairing at a different level, maybe the pain will go away. And if I'm masking that pain, I'm never going to know if I'm getting better. I'm just covering the pain. So I went through the pain, but I started working out at the gym again. I joined a gym that had an indoor pool, and I started swimming every single morning. And I cut out anything in a bag, a can, or a box, which are preservatives. And then I started eating more whole and organic foods. And I started doing the intermittent fasting and literally going down to one meal a day, which included a green drink. And I got to say this this is not for sale, but I got to say that it's organic greens that you grew in your garden. So thank you very much, because my day consists of a green drink every single day that's full of kale and spinach and all the goodness that you put in that powdered drink that I make every single morning. And so by changing that, it took about, and I kid you not, it took about 7 days before all the pain in my knee completely went away. 7 days, that's it. Is it worth it? Yeah, it is. And then I'll tell you something really sad. I hate to say this, and I hate to say it on air because I'm telling on myself, but we went through the Thanksgiving holiday where there were some pumpkin pies and pumpkin cheesecakes and some really delicious things. So I skipped the health segment, and I went for all the fun comfort foods that Thanksgiving provides. Within 3 days, my knee pain was back. So I said, wait a second, I know how to fix this. I went back to the gym, I cut everything out again, my knee gets better. Then we go into the Christmas season. And I was like, oh, more cheesecakes, more pies, like, this is great. And I had more treats. And again, within 3 days, my knee pain is back. And I'm like, this is really awful. But you know what? I know exactly what's causing it now. It's my diet, it's my lifestyle. And so if I will repair those two things on a consistent basis, I can consistently feel well. And what I'm trying to do right now as I move forward in my life, I'm not getting any younger, but as I get older, if I can move through that space pain-free by controlling my intake of preservatives and junk food, I have a real strong belief that I'm going to go through it flying free with, feeling healthy and being active and all the things that I think most of us wish for. And I think part of the consistency doesn't mean it's easy, but it means once you've made the commitment, it becomes easier to do. I remember in one of these sessions we had earlier, you made a commitment that you were not going to drink alcohol. You said, as a child, I realized that's not something I wanted to do. And so I made a commitment to myself not to drink alcohol. Well, I've known you for 53 years. And one of the things that I've known about you consistently is you've not had any alcohol in your diet or your life at all, ever. That's been a consistent behavior because you made a very firm commitment. Tell me about commitments and how commitments help your consistency.
Well, again, it goes back to your core values, and there are universal laws. There are foundational principles that have come down to us through the ages. We call them wisdom literature. And for example, cause and effect is what you're talking about. A lot of people do things because they taste good or it's popular, it's part of the culture, without realizing that there are causes and effects. And what you do is a cause, and it's going to have an effect. If you eat junk food, if you take chemicals into your body, it's going to have an effect. That's what the side effects of chemicals are. They're effects of the cause. And one of the problems I think we have in society and the way we deal with our healthcare system is that when you go to the doctor, they will test you and they will say you have high blood pressure.
Mm,
And so you need to take this pill to get your blood pressure down, without realizing that the high blood pressure is an effect.
mm,
And there's something that's actually causing that high blood pressure. And the doctor should say, well, let's examine your life and see if we can determine what is causing your high blood pressure. Because if you're doing everything right and you're eating right, you won't have high blood pressure. There's something in your life that isn't right. That's why this isn't right. So it goes across the board with relationships, with health, with all of the things that we're talking about. We need to start looking at causes instead of trying to remedy the effects that we don't like. We need to recognize the effects, but we need to immediately go to the cause. It's kind of like the problem solution thing. If you have a problem, you don't want to focus on the problem, you want to focus on the solution. You need to be aware of the problem, but you need to focus and put your energy into the solution. And that's where consistency comes in, because it applies to every aspect of our life, whether it's diet, whether it's exercise, whether it's making commitments, whether it's interacting with people, whether it's keeping our environment clean and pristine. There needs to be a consistency and alignment with our thoughts and our words and our actions and our core values and universal laws and principles. If all of those things are in alignment, it's easy to be consistent because everything is congruent, everything works together. There's a field called heuristics where you react to something immediately because of your ingrained habit. And some of our habits are good habits and some of our habits are bad habits. And sometimes we don't spend enough time analyzing our lives. Why do we do things? Is this a good habit or is this a bad habit? As you look at society, almost 50% of marriages end in divorce. In fact, I heard a story the other day. A fellow said, I was looking at a poll this morning and 50% of marriages are unhappy. And I took this poll in my own home this morning. It's kind of funny. But anyway, there's so many things that are not in alignment. We have a society today that isn't in alignment with core values and universal laws and foundational principles. we're kind of drifting aimlessly. And a lot of the people who make the decisions that govern our country, that govern our states, that govern our communities, are influenced by interests that keep them in office. If a company will put money into your campaign, you support that company, even if it's polluting the waterways, or even if it's polluting the air that we breathe. And so we need to be very consistent in selecting people who are sharing our same values, our core values, and our foundational principles. We need to encourage people who have strong, consistent values to lead our communities, to lead our schools. We're having all kinds of situations in our schools today with all of the, I'm not sure what words we can use on the air, but there's
Well,
a lot
choose them
of
carefully then.
there are a lot of, when I was growing up, there were little boys and little girls, and everything was, life was simple. And believe it or not, everything worked out pretty well. People could figure things out, and life was simpler, and life was better in a lot of ways. We didn't have a lot of this rioting culture that we have today, where people would just burn things down and throw bricks through store windows, and they're destructive in their approach to solving problems. They're actually creating other problems while they're saying they're against other problems. And we're letting too many people tell us that we have problems that we wouldn't even recognize the problem. For example, some people think that I'm racist, but I'm not racist at all, in my own opinion. I value everyone. I hope I love everyone. I want everyone to have the same advantages that I have. I want everyone to love their countries and to be productive individuals. There isn't a particular race or color of skin or ideology. I accept different religions, and I like to talk to people about different things. And yet I would be considered probably a terrorist to some groups of people.
Well, and I know, in all due respect, I know you and I've known you my entire life, and our home has been filled with a wide diversity of people in our home. And so I know that that's not true, but I will warn you, as you join YouTube and you become a podcaster and you enter into a public life, if you will, there are a bunch of trolls. And like you said, there are people that will just attack you and say mean things to you and about you. And it's one of the hardest lessons that I learned, because nobody really warned me about it and nobody prepared me for it. But the way that I look at it, and I think this goes back to the consistency, when you talk about people whose lives are, and I'm going to say broken in a sense that there is no consistency, there is no pattern, there are no foundational principles that they're living by. What happens is we have people that consistently are hurting, and they are wanting to be acknowledged, they're wanting to be heard, they're wanting to be like, hey, my voice matters. And when nobody listens to their voice and nobody makes them feel important, then they become obnoxious and they become mean, if you will. And then they start doing the pickets and the riots and the, listen to me and whatever. They just become radical in their presentations. And when I look at that, I don't see this person that's just gone ballistic. I see that as a person that's crying for help. And they're saying, wait a second, I matter. And how do I matter? And so they jump on these weird bandwagons that are going by. And I'm not trying to be ugly, but there was, during the pandemic, there was this big thing about wearing face masks. And there were these people that were like, I'm going to live and die by this face mask rule. You are not going to make me wear a face mask. And I mean, like, who cares? What's the big deal? You either do or you don't. And if you don't, that's your prerogative. But like, don't try to recruit all your friends. It's a small window of time. If you go into a public place and they say, wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask, break their rule. But don't make it a big issue. And there are people going on the social medias and they were like, you're not my friend if you wear a face mask. And I was like, what on earth? And I mean, it was just really silly stuff that people were, I'm going to live and die by this. Why? There are bigger battles to fight, right? Let's talk about pollution or obesity or, I mean, there are other things we could talk about. But when I see trolls, and I'm going to call them trolls just for lack of a better term, and I think we all know what that means. I see that as people crying out for help, like, hey, the world just got really complicated. Do I still have a voice and do I matter? And my attempt at that, I can't control trolls, nor do I want to. But what I can do, and this goes back to the consistency in our lives, when I meet someone face to face, I can look them in the eye, I can make eye contact, and I can ask them a simple question like, hi, how are you today? And I can stand there and I can wait while they give me an answer instead of just blowing right by them like, hey, and they're like, oh, hey, and then you're gone, right? Stand just a minute longer. Have a conversation just a minute longer. When you meet someone, say thank you, say please, have interactions that say, I heard you and you matter. It's amazing how in every conversation, and I'm a very abrupt person, especially with my team. When my team sends me a text message, they'll say, here's this deadline that just happened. And it would be easy to say, gotcha. And then I have to stop and say, how are you today? I'm glad that you showed up for work today. Thanks so much for putting this together. And I got your message. And just the little extra sentence that I add on at the beginning makes all the difference in their loyalty, in their ability to feel heard, in their ability to, wait a second, now I'm motivated to actually finish my job and do a better job because I was seen, I was heard. But the world right now is full of people that don't feel heard. And so you're right. They're throwing rocks through store windows. They're rioting. They're setting vehicles on fire. They're causing all kinds of chaos where no chaos really needs to happen. And they don't win anything from the chaos they're creating. I mean, many people, if you ask them, do you have a dog in the fight? They don't. They don't even have a dog in the fight. I know people fighting for causes that have nothing to do with them. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I'm like, why are you spending all this time and energy?
Yeah, it's a funny world that we live in. But before we go today, there's certain things about consistency that I would like to really emphasize that I think are important. One is that we need to consistently be mindful. We need to actually analyze our life. We need to analyze the food that we eat. We need to analyze our exercise program. We need to analyze our relationships. We need to analyze every aspect of our life. And the areas that we're weak in, we need to alter those things. We need to make decisions, begin programs, begin processes that will make us better people. And when we commit to do those things, we need to be consistent in that commitment. If we're going to make a New Year's resolution, we need to keep that resolution. And if we're not going to keep it, we need to face ourselves in the very beginning and say, why would I do this if I'm not going to do this? Why would I say I'm going to do it if I'm not going to do it? Why would I fool myself? And we need to be for example, if you're in a family situation, if you have a spouse or children, be consistent in showing them love, showing them compassion, showing them how you want them to be as people. Be an example for them. Be consistent in the life that you live. If you're going to teach them principles, be sure those principles are principles that you live by and that you incorporate those. Be consistent in your thoughts, in your words, in your actions, in your core beliefs, in adhering to universal laws and foundational principles. We need to be consistent. We need to sit down and ask ourselves, what kind of a person do I really want to be? And I know I'm going to run into circumstances that are contrary. I know that I have plan A, but plan B or C is going to take place. How am I going to respond to that? Do I have anger management problems? How do I handle my emotions? Do I fly off the handle? Do I become depressed? do I become anything negative? And how would a person that I want to be respond to this situation? We can go through those situations in our mind and kind of create the proaction that we want to implement. And so by taking time to sit down with ourselves and to meditate and to see ourselves as we want to be and to identify those principles and values that are important to us and know what they are, it helps to write them down, to keep a journal. I guess we do the journals this way now. When I was young, we had the pencil and we wrote everything down.
Actually, we don't. We do the journals just like this now, where you just talk to a camera and it records everything.
It is a different world.
I want to ask a question because I can't get away from the fact that in 2024 you will celebrate 58 years of being married to the same woman. And I love the fact that you led by example. You gave all of your children, and for those of you that are just joining us or watching the replay, he's made a couple of comments about all the children. He's the father of 19 children. I'm one of them. As I watched you and mom over the last as many years as I've been alive, which is 53 years, there's been a consistency to your relationship. Can you speak for a second when you talk about the consistency in families? Can you speak to the consistency that is required in relationships when there are ebbs and flows of people going through different stages? For example, mom was pregnant numerous times, lots of hormones, lots of changes. You said earlier in this conversation that in the beginning of your parenting that there were things that you didn't know, so you couldn't present them as a lifestyle because you didn't know them yet. And so there are ebbs and flows as you've grown and developed as a couple. What are some of the consistencies that have kept you guys together?
Well, I think understanding some of those core values, if you're flying by the traditions, by the culture, for example, our culture is changing all of the time. Uh, People just living together was not part of the culture that I grew up in. Being married and committed to a person, being consistent with that person for your entire life was a core value. And there are causes and there are effects. And why do we think that why there is such a high rate of divorces and such a high rate of marriages that are, let's say, unhappy, but they stay together? There are a lot of families that are sort of dysfunctional. And why are families dysfunctional? There are roles that husbands have and that wives have, that children have, and everyone, if they understand their roles and they're consistent in following through on those roles, it would solve a lot of issues that we're dealing with in our society. So I think we had a lot of those values in the beginning, and we looked at things in a holistic way. And so when we got married, we took that very, very seriously. And the way I envisioned that in my own mind was that when I got married, I created a new organism. And it wasn't just me, and it wasn't just my spouse, but it was us together. And so when we made decisions, we sat down and we talked through the decisions. When we talked about health, we would sit down and analyze the information that we had at hand. For example, to eat the whole wheat berries that were organically grown. 90% of the wheat today is genetically modified. Most of the corn is genetically modified. Most of the soybeans are genetically modified. Now they're genetically modifying beets and all different kinds of produce. So sitting down and learning and discussing and finding out what's going on and saying, this is happening in our society, but it's not going to happen in my home. It's not going to happen in my environment. I am going to control what I eat. I'm going to be responsible for that. I'm going to be accountable for that. I'm going to be accountable for how my marriage turns out because I want to be responsible in how I relate to my wife in my case. And so having empathy for people and understanding people and listening to people, we need to be consistent in that interaction that we have. We need to be consistent in all of the aspects of our life. And we can't be if we don't define them very specifically and very clearly to ourselves. If we don't know who we are, if we don't know what our core values are, if we don't know what the universal laws are, then we don't really know what to be consistent in. And so the more we really understand and we have a strong knowing that we're on the right course, it's easier to be consistent following that program. If you know who you are and where you're going, if you have set goals and objectives that are very clear and obtainable, it's easy to be consistent. But if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know what you're doing, if tomorrow is different than today, if today anything could happen today and I might get really mad today, I might become angry or depressed because of this happening or that happening. We can't be consistent unless we sit down with ourselves and say, this is the person that I want to be. This is the way this person would respond to this situation. Somebody's going to have a different belief system than I have, and this is how I'm going to respond to it. Someone may insult me today, and this is how I'm going to respond to it. Someone may send me a hate letter today, and this is how I'm going to respond to it. So that we're living in a proactive world, creating our reality instead of just reacting to everything heuristically.
Well, and when you say create a world that you want to live in, it doesn't necessarily mean easy, because in the process of being married now for 58 years, which is commendable, by the way, congratulations,
Thank you.
you and mom decided somewhere along the way that part of your foundational principles included homeschooling. And having that many children is wow. And then homeschooling that many children is like double wow. So tell me about the consistency in deciding that education at home was not just a wise and wonderful choice, but that you were going to consistently do that through the duration of my entire educational growing up years.
There has been such a change in information from the time I was young to now. The world that we live in today is so technologically advanced, and every week we talk about the AI that's just coming online. It is so different than the world that I grew up in. But again, it goes back to those core values and principles. Um, we have to determine just really who we want to be, how we want to relate to things. It was an interesting fact. For 18 years, I had 7 teenagers at the same time. Every one of the teen years was in my home. And teenagers are kind of a wily group where they're coming into their own, making their own decisions. They want to be different than their parents. They want to make their own decisions, and they want to start driving when they're 12 years old, and it gets worse as they become teenagers. So you have to be consistent in the way you present yourself and the way you raise your family. Uh, it was
When you say
challenging.
when you say you had 18 years of teenagers, don't forget that before they were teenagers, you also had 18 years consistently of toddlers. Oh,
Well,
oh,
we had
oh.
toddlers. We had toddlers at the same time, and we had teenagers for a lot of years. But I'm saying for 18 years, we had 7 at a time. We had all 7 teenage years filled with teenagers. And so, yeah, our life was, it had its challenges, and I don't ever remember a time that plan A was in effect. We always had plan B and C. And so we had to learn to be consistent as circumstances changed. As circumstances changed, our values didn't change. We had to maintain those core values through what was happening. Even today, with what's going on nationally, the things that we've talked about today, why would nations fight each other? Why are we killing women and children in foreign countries? Why would anyone want to do that? If you valued people, if you valued relationships, we would seek to have peace and tranquility, not only with ourself and in our family, but in our community, in our country, and in the world itself. We should look at other countries and see ways that we could help them and encourage them and maybe share our values with them. So we need to be consistent in all of the things that are productive and good, things that move us forward and upward and that would make our lives better, that our relationships would be better, and that we would be consistent in following through with our New Year's resolutions and in our diets and our exercise programs and in every possible way. Consistency is a really valuable trait that we should embrace.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Our time is up, but one of the strongest messages that we've heard yet so far on the Live with Impact channel, which is about consistency in the choices that we make and how if we actually make those choices and we follow them consistently, that our future is within reach. It is something we do have control over, and it's something we can attain based on the consistent behaviors repeated over time. And you've lived your life as an example to show us that not only is this a fancy concept, but it's something that's actually doable. So I commend you and I applaud you. And I thank you for joining us today for this immensely helpful and wonderful element of my week. If you're just joining us or you're watching the replay, please pick up your copy of the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. This is volume 1 of volume 2. Both volumes are now available, and we meet every single week so that we can unpack with Omuugn himself the different elements that will help us become the best versions of ourselves. Until next time, have a great week and live a life with passion.